The nuns wanted me to become a nun, so I look a little bit nunnish today. So they're always trying to get me to become a nun, you know. It was always like, when I was little, people called me Renee. It wasn't until I went to Paris and found out that it was actually Renee that I became Renee. But when I was little, I was Renee. So the nuns were always at me. Oh, Renee, you have a nun's face. Oh, Renee, you'd make a lovely nun. So, of course, back in those days, it was almost expected, but more especially in the country than, like I grew up in the inner city. But in the country, almost everybody had a nun or a priest in their family, isn't that right? Yeah. So, anyway, there was no way, because I had, my mother's friends were always telling me that I'd make a nice actress. So of course there was a competition now between the nuns trying to make a nun of me and my mother's friend saying, there was a play on at the time in Dublin called The Bad Seed. And I think they made it into a movie later. Now I've never seen it, but the women in Stephen's Green that used to wait to pick up their kids after school, and my mother be there waiting for me, so they said, you look just like that girl in The Bad Seed. But I had no idea what I think it's kind of, wasn't she, was it?
She was evil. She
killed people. Oh, she killed people. Well, that wasn't me. I was always a good girl, I was. Anyway, I wasn't born in 1933, like my two cohorts here. But I was born in 1945 in Dublin, in the tenements in the inner city. And, urban poverty is a lot different than being poor in the country. You know, Ireland was a poor country, everybody was poor, that's a given. But living in the city, there were no resources, you know, you couldn't grow your food, you didn't have a garden, you didn't have anything like that. But I was an imaginative child, so even though we lived in the tenements and it was rough, it was really rough. So we had no electricity, we had no running water, we had 2 rows of tenements with a courtyard in the middle, and so there was a tap for cold water. That maybe 8 or 10 families used the running water. But if the weather was good, I would put on plays out there in the smelly courtyard, you know. So my best friend Kathleen McLaughlin, she had a piece of red velvet, and we used to put that over the smelly toilet, and either she or I would be the princess, you know. So when I put on the plays in the summertime, there was a clothesline out in the yard, so we put a blanket over the clothesline, and then behind was backstage, and then we put on a little play in the front. And I had a brother who was a year younger than me, my brother Sean, and somebody in the lane where we lived got this beautiful little dress from some aunt somewhere in America, and I remember the dress really distinctly. It was red, and it had cowboy boots and lassos on it. And so I insisted on dressing Sean in that little red dress. And I even made up a song, and Thomas Burr's egg jingle, jangle, jingle. So it's a combination of Gaelic and English. And I had my brother Sean sing, my spurs are going jingle, jangle, jingle. So there was always this disconnect between, are you going to be a nun? I mean, I actually, you know, I knew that if you were a nun, you probably got 3 meals a day, which was something we didn't get in our house, you know. So there was always this this thing about the religion, being a nun, and then the stage. So the nuns who wanted me to be a nun, I was getting free vocal coaching and I was getting violin lessons. So on the one hand, they were trying to tell me I should be a nun, and on the other hand, they were helping me cultivate this artistic side of myself, you know. So, you know, the stage won out, you know. So I got away from home when I was 17. I actually ran away to Paris. I had been working and I had been stashing some money in the mattress, and my father, who was a great drinker, had gotten hold of the money and pissed away my runaway money for my ticket to Paris. So that was the end of that story. But I happened to meet an actor, William Marshall, who was in Dublin playing Othello, and I happened to meet him, and he told me he had a friend in Paris. I told him I wanted to go to Paris, and I couldn't go to Paris, and I didn't have the money to go to Paris, blah, blah, blah. So he introduced me to a friend of his in Paris, and so I had some digs when I got there. So I went between Paris and London and Dublin. I was always homesick when I was away. I couldn't wait to get away, and I was always dreaming of getting away, and I hated my home life, and I hated the church, and I hated the poverty, and I hated the fact that I felt different. I felt that I didn't fit in, so I was always hoping to get away. Yet when I got away, I was heartbroken and homesick, especially at Christmas time, you know? Christmas times were so hard when I was away. I wanted to be at home, even though I didn't have good memories of Christmas. We never had enough to eat. Christmas Eve, we could be waiting for the local pub, the owner of the local pub, to knock on the door and bring us a turkey. I mean, we wouldn't know if we were going to have a Christmas dinner or not. So here's all these contradictions in my life. You know, I'm homesick, I want to be home for Christmas, and yet at Christmas we never knew whether we were going to have a Christmas or not. So so my father would spend all his money in the local pub, the Hive, and then we'd wait on Christmas Eve to see if the owner of the Hive would bring us a turkey. And there were other things, you know. We would get food on tick. Do you know what that means, on tick? It's like on account, you know, at the shop in the lane. So sometimes at Christmas time, maybe that woman who owned that shop, Mrs. Bannon, she might come by and give us a fruit cake or, you know, something nice for Christmas. So I bounced back and forth between countries, always trying to just establish who I was. You know, who am I? What's my role in life? What's my purpose in life? Where do I want to be? Who do I want to be? And so after a while, I mean, I'm sure everybody can identify with being an immigrant, that after a while you don't feel at home in either place. Mm-hmm. You know, when you're back in Ireland, you're the Yank, and when you're here, you're the Paddy. You know, so that was confusing as well. I couldn't quite settle back in Ireland as much as I wanted to settle there. I still dream about living in Ireland. I'm just back from Ireland. I go once or twice a year. You know, my dream is to live on the West Coast in a little cottage. You know, I have all those romantic dreams of living in Ireland. Oh, and where I differ from my two fellows who told us about their life stories, I never got the money thing together. I never, ever, ever got the money thing together. I had to do everything. When I ran away to Paris, I got my plane ticket because I went and auditioned to be a showgirl. And I got the job, but I knew I didn't want to do the job, but I got a free ticket. So that was how I got to Paris. I didn't have the bus fare from Orly Airport to go to the friend of Williams that I was going to go and stay with. So I took a taxi from Orly into Paris, and I knocked on the woman's door. I never met her before in my life, and she had to pay the taxi fare. So that was how I started. So all of my travels have all been done on a shoestring. And recently, when I was sick, I counted how many countries that I've visited or lived in, and I'm up to 150 now. But I've never had a good paying job. I've always had jobs where I wasn't indispensable, you know. I started, I lived in Canada for a while. I emigrated to Canada because the Canadian government were offering to pay people's passage to Canada. So you got a loan of $200 and you had 2 years to pay it back. So I had been back living in Ireland again, and terribly unhappy, longing for elsewhere. And I took the Canadian government up on their offer of the passage. So I remember I was flying from Dublin to London and then taking the train to Southampton and getting on a ship from Southampton to Montreal. And my mother and my brother Sean brought me out to Dublin Airport. And I remember walking towards the plane and saying to myself, if there is a God, please, please, if there is a God, let him act now. Let him ask them, have them beg me to stay. And I remember, I really truly remember that I felt my heart breaking when I was walking away to get on the airplane. I didn't look back at them. And that's how confused I was. I didn't know where I belonged.
Oh dear.
You know, I couldn't be in Ireland. I just couldn't get a grip there. Part of the reason of not being able to get a grip there was I was the poor kid from the bad neighborhood with the bad address. And even though I had a good education and I was smart and there were lots of things I could do, I could never quite get in where I wanted to get in. Because if the address came up, there was an immediate prejudice, you know. It was, the class thing is and was alive and well. Anyway, I spent years in Canada, and I was quitting Canada and I was going to live in Egypt. And I got on a ship, and it's a long story and it's a wonderful story, but you have to buy my book to read it. I met this fantastic longshoreman from San Francisco. Just one night on the ship, he just comes wandering into the bar in his polyester suit. That nearly put me off because it was like, no, I can't talk to anybody wearing a polyester suit. I had lived in Paris, you know. So this wonderful longshoreman, he had a suitcase. He had 2 polyester suits. And he had a lot of limes that he had picked up in Acapulco to go with the tequila that he had in the suitcase as well. He's sober now, which is nice. But he liked his booze. But he's been sober for 30 years. That's a nice footnote to the story. Anyway, we fell in love, and instead of ending up in Alexandria, Egypt, where I was headed, I ended up in San Francisco.
Oh my God.
And so I got involved with the Irish community in San Francisco because I'm a big fan of Sean O'Casey, whose birthday it is today. And I just want to read you a beautiful thing about Sean O'Casey. And I noticed that both of the men who spoke here, they mentioned trade unions, and I'm a union maid, and I appreciated that his dad didn't take the plastic piping and turn them into millionaires because he was sticking with his principles and his trade union beliefs. So Sean O'Casey, it's his birthday today, and he was a playwright and wonderful writer and a great trade unionist. And often he's given short shrift in the Irish community because he was a bit of a socialist. But anyway, to Sean O'Casey, labourer and playwright. So listen to this carefully because it's so beautiful. To Sean O'Casey, labourer and playwright, culture was not in the mystic legends of Gaelic heroes, nor was it with those who held the aristocratic keys to galleries and theatres. Culture, to O'Casey, reigned in places where working people dwelled. What is called culture, he once wrote, isn't just the theatre here, the other arts there, music yonder. Culture is the life we live, and unless the theatre, music, and the arts are within us, around us, essential to us, not cultivated, but naturally part of ourselves, always with us in field, factory, and workshop, as well as on a stage, in a concert hall, hanging on the walls of a picture gallery, then it is outside of us, and we have little or no part with the arts. Culture is expressed, shown in the schools where we are taught, the homes where we live, the factories and fields where we work, the streets we walk through, the simple things we use when we eat and drink, and the packages that carry them into our homes, the very bindings on the books we read, the clothes we wear, the way we live and move and have our being. It is far more than books on our shelves and pictures in our galleries. It is all that is within us, all without, colouring all of our activities. I got in with the Irish community around Sean O'Casey's 100th, the anniversary of his 100th birthday, which was 1980. And it was the first time I came out here to the United Irish Cultural Centre, and I was trying to get support for fundraising and, you know, putting on cultural events. And I was trying to tie in his trade unionism with his theatre work. And so we had a wonderful festival. So I wanted to see, I don't know how the time is, I don't want to bore you to distraction, as Molly Bloom said in Ulysses. Oh, the other thing she said that I thought I would quote is, let's see, it's a pleasure, the Lord knows, to have so many intelligent people to talk to about yourself. So because it's an Irish event, so an Irish event should have, we're talking here about culture, it should be a hoolie, and like at a hoolie you just call on people to get up and perform, and there's actually professional people here, professional singers and actors. Surprisingly, a couple of friends in the front here that we were in the San Francisco Labor Theatre together, where we would get involved in labor struggles. We'd get together, we'd put little skits together, we'd make props and costumes, just like in the lane, and we would go out on the picket lines or to the demonstrations, and we would have our say. We would do our little skits, and surprisingly they showed up here today, and their son lives in Dublin and is a poet, and the poets in Dublin tell me that he's the best poet in Dublin. Oh. And that's my friends in the front here, Alex and Harriet.
Oh my
God! And Vincey Keane is back there hiding. So I'm going to call on him in a few minutes. So I'm going to sing you a song, and then I'll call up Vincey, and then maybe Alex and Harriet will come up, and this is hoolie-like. It's impromptu. It's not, this wasn't planned. These people just showed up, and I'm going to embarrass them by calling them up here. So I want to sing a song in Gaelic, and it's an immigrant song. There's so many songs of longing for elsewhere. I mean, the immigrant song of longing for Ireland. I remember being in New Zealand one time, and I happened to see a Celtic cross up on a hill, so I went up there to the graveyard, and it was an Irish cemetery. And the heartbreaking little messages and notes and whatever you call them. What do you call those things? Your epitaph. Your epitaph. Everybody in this graveyard, they were all Irish people from Donegal and the west coast of Ireland from the 1800s. And you just knew. I mean, it was heartbreaking. I sat there and wept because I thought of, they left home, they left their families, they left their Ireland, and they never got back there again. I mean, there was just no way to get home again. You know, now we can fly back and forth, you know. So this is a song it's longing for Ireland, and it's talking about, I wish I had a boat, I wish there was a boatman, I wish I could swim, but I have to get back to Ireland because I have to die in Ireland. Da mein hein in orti kuring, na kjont leipud taiwaduem, ban of liam gandal kurd, gagliam no guach de doni, agus ach ligis o, liondo is o, Shemo crita trom, agus brona. Na melka gum criche is raw. No gun number English and no. Eg dulas gia go frishing slan. Skavain shabas in erin. Agus ach ligis o, liondo vis o, Shemo crita trom, agus brona.